right, hi everyone. Hope everybody had a great break. We're ready to bring it back now. And I would like to introduce Masahito, who will be moderating the software stack topic discussion. We'll be throwing up an Etherpad here, and then I will let Masahito take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Can you hear me without any noise? Yeah, sometimes my mic makes a noise. So
there's a little bit of noise.
Okay, I will change the mic. How about this?
That's great.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, I will share the Etherpad page. Okay, can you see my screen?
Looks good.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So thank you for joining this software stack sessions. I think this session is the first effort in the Open Dev Summit for I think so. The no specific direction for this session right now. So feel free to talk and write any topics and any idea, comment, and thought. And so and please write your names if you want to join in the discussions. Yeah. So I wrote few topics for that. And before starting the topics, this software stack session will cover entire your system software stack as well as the OpenStack. So we don't need to stick to the OpenStack OSS, OpenStack software, but we can talk about the OSS software, open source software for that software stack. And I wrote it few topics related to these software stacks. So first one is about how the software stack changes concerning the size of the deployment. Like when you make your deployment, the bigger how the software stack was changed with that scaling or something. And I put few perspective for that scaling and software stack. First one is deployment and network, and second one is deployment and testing, and the other one is the application delivery. So yeah. And also I think we will have one voting for the software stack about what point did you feel that any difficulty for your software stacks? So please vote the voting. Yeah, please vote, and then I think we can share the difficulty of our software stack with others. Yep. I think as the previous discussion, you can unmute yourself. I think so. If you have any comment, please raise a hand or please talk something.
Yeah, Prakash here. I would like to comment on the software stack having changed, mainly because baseline today, folks consider that you have your Kubernetes cluster as the base, and even the OpenStack goes into the control plane as one of the stacks. So
Yes.
Kubernetes has changed more, not just being a container orchestrator, it has become a state machine basically now. So you have a state machine which is underneath and which is trying to deploy everything else in the control plane. Could be OpenStack, could be what you call the OpenShift, or could be any of the cloud controllers for the control plane. So there is a perception as well as a change in the software stack being containerized. It's becoming more and more common to assume that you are going to get either integrated OpenStack you want to install, or you want to just pick and choose some of the modules, but all of them have to be containerized for a large scale deployment. And the next part of it obviously comes that where is the workload? So workload may be containerized, may not be containerized, depending on what kind of cloud controller combinations you are using, multi-cloud as well as hybrid cloud. That's what, when it comes to stack, we have to stop thinking of being a VM-based stack, rather we think of container-based stack. That's what is happening, or at least moving towards, I would put it. That's my comments. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So the basing on the applications, you mean we have to change the virtual machine or bare metal virtual machine and yeah, container and without with the container. So so like for telecom application, we should pick the bare metal and the non-containerized or something like that. You mean depending on the application features or characteristics.
So the application is one part of it, but this platform itself is the first issue. See, application is service facing, whereas the system is resource facing. So when you're resource facing, it apparently, when you talk about integrated OpenStack, the first question comes to is, how do I interoperate with bare metal, VM, containers, all is in the play now. So this looks like software stack, smaller units and scalable, auto-scalable versions are better. So obviously microservices is one of those where even all our OpenStack modules, we have to really consider them as microservices, like networking services for VM, compute services with VM or without VM, with just being on containers or in bare metal physical. So the whole concept of software stack is actually it's evolving, and it's a moving target right now. Keeping integrated OpenStack is fine, but we need to look at distributed stack now. That's the reality. Whether we go to the edge, whether we go towards the 5G, or whether we go towards the core, or we keep at the edge, far edge. So it's a challenge at this time because software is evolving, and nothing, we would say that I don't see that OpenStack will remain as is, as of current stack, how it is. Maybe 5 years hence it will be totally different and distributed with different way of looking at it.
So the first, when we talk, sounds like when we start to talk about software stack, we should classify the areas or the size of the software stacks, like for the edge and for edge and the data center or something like that. Before we are talking about the the deployment or application delivery or any these stuff. Is is it your comment?
Sure. So we do have the edge architecture, which our edge group has put out. Certainly, it does bring small, medium, large, and numbers. But uh, so thousands and larger would be thousands and 10,000s and 100,000. You can count in terms of cores. You can count in terms of the nodes. You can count in terms of. So yes, there is a sizing, and definitely, but at the same time, sizing in terms of units, number of units, uh, even if you look at the various other industry initiatives like CNTT, they do have a block. So there is always modularity of scaling. So even if we classify them, still we have to talk in terms of units, whether we want to have 1,000 VMs or whether we want to have 10,000 VMs or 10,000 containers, 100,000 containers, million containers, and how many nodes. So the topology is varied, but the units still matter. Units need not be as big because we always assume that we are going to get a horizontal scaling.
Okay. So I got it. Your point. I think the first we have to clarify the size of the software stack, size of the how to say, infrastructure we target, and I think this open dev session is for the large scale. So I think that if it's okay, so I think we can talk about the large scale size, the software stacks first. And sorry, I'm not familiar for the edge cases, size of edge. So
yeah, Masahito, I think that you make a good point of thinking about large scale software, and one of the questions that was in the Etherpad was on line 43 around deploying on virtual machines or bare metal and with containers or without containers. I know that as we have talked with users and looked at some of the data from our user survey, we've definitely seen like bare metal adoption has grown. We have a topic tomorrow, I think, about around bare metal specifically, but I'm curious, what people are doing on their software deployment front. Are they, there was a while where it was like virtual machines were definitely the preferred mechanism for deploying software stacks on top of clouds. Is that moving to bare metal more, or containers and virtual machines are still heavy on virtual machines? I think that's an interesting one that I would love to hear any feedback on from people.
thank you, Jonathan.
I can just throw out there that from our perspective, it's still been virtual machines as a base. I mean, the cloud's obviously bare metal underneath, but everything is the cloud itself is all containerized, and then applications within the cloud are more often becoming Kubernetes-ish, OpenShift generally, but all that stuff runs on top of VMs and is spawned and scaled by heat stacks. So it's kind of adding another layer to the onion, but still VMs involved.
I mean, it could be interesting to run a poll on whether people use VMs or bare metal or containers as the base for their deployments, and also whether that changes based on the size of the deployment. So I'm not sure we can actually do that through the poll system that we have, because
You want like a two-dimensional poll?
yes, it's two-dimensional.
Maybe use
but
Etherpad.
Maybe the
Cool.
Etherpad,
That will be
like
cool.
if people could give a sense of whether they're engaging with they're starting deployment using like a VM based deployment solution, and then switch to bare metal, or more bare metal driven by infrastructure, bare metal, pure bare metal, or container type deployment like Cola or OpenStack Helm. I don't know if that's
there's a list of tools. There's a list of deployment tools down below. I think, where did it go? Line 132, with a bunch of deployment tools listed out. People could +1 what they're using for deployment on there, and we can do like a custom containerized, custom bare metal, something like that. And if I forgot, I didn't list all these out. So if somebody's got deployment tools, but you can just +1 next to what you're using. And that would kind of give us an idea of whether it's containerized or bare metal or other.
You mean in Etherpad?
Yeah, on the Etherpad.
Which Etherpad are you in?
Yeah, you might be in the wrong one.
Oh, maybe I am. Oh, sorry.
We'll drop it in the chat.
Okay, I'll find it. Yep. Well, we can just put one there. Here, I can put it in there. I might have put it in the wrong place. I'll be sorry.
Is it for the tools, Etherpad?
I'll just copy it into the other one. That was the right one. The link you just put in the chat, line 132.
We're actually in the one that Allison put in, the large scale software stack.
Okay, that's the other one that I was already into the chat. So sorry.
Dueling Etherpads.
There we go. Yeah, that's 2 Etherpads for 1 session. It's not good. Okay. Yeah, somebody's got it already pasted in there, so that's what I added to. That's fine.
I don't mind talking a bit about some of the contrasts we've had between bare metal usage and VM usage. I think it's interesting because it does mirror some of what we spoke about in the previous session about how much the application is ready for failure. So we spoke about the need for, like, if you do have those 2 switches, it means you can fail over between them while you're doing the firmware upgrade. It's kind of similar. If you take the cost of VMs, then you've got the ability to do host upgrades without affecting the applications in your cloud and firmware upgrades on those hosts. Whereas it's obviously a bit different if you take the bare metal route. I don't know if people have seen other contrasts. So it depends on your application, like whether that VM tax, so to speak, is a big deal. Certainly in the HPC world, where there's an awful lot of customers that are very used to getting every last ounce out of their bare metal machine, so they tend to be happy to take the hit of knowing that bare metal machine is an individual machine, and if it dies, it dies. I don't know if people are seeing other similar patterns. So I guess in the OpenStack sense, like underneath, we're kind of using Ironic to do the deploy, but we're also, once you've got the hang of doing that Ironic for your hypervisor deploy, also allowing that for customer deploys, but obviously there's a security concern there in terms of securing that bare metal machine. I don't know if people are seeing the same trade-offs or if they've got fixes to that security problem.
From what I've seen, the VM-based deployment solutions are losing steam, and it's more of a game between, like you said, like container-based deployment for convenience, or bare metal-based deployment for high, like a high performance, not losing anything. And it's probably a good sign that we've facilitated the deployment through the various tooling that we've produced as a community. I don't know if there is anyone still using purely VM-based system for their deployment. I haven't seen. Most of those are more.
CERN's still VM based, aren't they?
Which one?
CERN? So if they were saying yesterday, somebody was, Belmiro was saying yesterday that they're still running virtual machines for their control plane, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's they're transitioning as well, although maybe he can answer. I guess I should say I was talking more about the workload, not the control plane. The control plane is bare metal with containers, because Collar Ansible and KB, but for the general case that I'm seeing, I'm more talking about the workloads that the users are running on there. Where Kubernetes runs, it depends on where they want to put that. Sometimes the dynamic nature of, so people want auto-scaling Kubernetes clusters, and the bare metal create time is so long that they prefer the VMs for that flexibility and able to spin up, spin down quicker. So cluster autoscaler within Magnum works quite quickly with VMs, but when you have the whole, it takes 5 minutes to get through the post process for the bare metal machine, it can take some time.
To come back to the initial question, which was, is the technical choice changing based on the size of the deployment? I feel like between the container and the bare metal systems, both are equally suitable for large scale. It's more a question of the trade-offs you want to make in terms of performance versus convenience or flexibility. Is that a fair statement, or is there like a more of a container-oriented type of deployments when the scale goes up? What's your experience?
I'm happy to share some things that I've seen. Certainly what I've seen a pattern of is that while everything Thierry said is true, there tends to be more, at the larger scale, there's more sense for people to have specialisms. So for those, people have those difficult workloads where they can only run on bare metal. So at the larger scale, there's more of those that are a problem. So they tend to have to deal with that in a more systematic way. So it forces them to worry about, actually dealing with a bare metal case. Where if there's not so many of those shouty people, you can get away with a slightly more generic solution of the VM. But maybe that's a special case for the environment I've been in.
So Tom Barron in the Zoom chat put an interesting comment about Manila, and I think this is we've sort of maybe bounced back and forth between talking about the deployment of the applications running on top of an environment versus the deployment of an OpenStack environment. But he says that in Manila they're designing for storage consumption equally by containers, virtual machines, and bare metal nodes. Thinking this is a dynamic area and it's a mistake to make restrictive bets. So from the workload perspective, designing for usage across containers, VMs, and bare metal is, I guess, is the path that Manila is taking, rather than making too much of a bet right now on everybody going back to bare metal or sticking with VMs or moving to containers.
Yeah, I
if
think
if I were to make a bet, I would bet that lots of application users will be running in container orchestrators, Kubernetes specifically, and that Kubernetes will be running on different cloud providers, including OpenStack. And that on OpenStack, obviously it'll run on Nova VMs. You'll use Nova VMs, but we'll see increasingly interest in running it on bare metal there, so that you would have hundreds of different Kubernetes clouds belonging to, typically smaller sub-organizations. I'm thinking more private cloud than public cloud case, but it's almost like public cloud, the self-tenant, self-service multi-tenant type of OpenStack. But that's a bet. I could well be wrong about that. And so, yeah, we want Manila, which is consumed over a network, to work in all of these, and we're making sure it does. You mentioned the deployment side of it, and there the important thing, I think, is that for this service, it can run very well with all the other OpenStack services, or it can run more or less standalone. It runs in containers today as well as on bare metal. So different orchestration possibilities are possible for running the service in terms of, do you have a Kubernetes based deployment tool? Do you have something like heat stacks and that deploy with containers, which is what my company does today. But again, just trying to maintain lots of degrees of freedom and modularity for that kind of thing. I don't know if I'm responding appropriately, Jonathan, but thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thanks for chiming in.
Okay. So before moving forward, voting will finish in a few minutes, I think. So please vote if you vote yet. For that, what point do you feel difficult in your software stack? Yeah. So sounds like the for the bare metal or the VM, the discussion sounds like we have based on the workload or the applications, the characteristics. We decided which we will use for which bare metal or VM we will use, and then we will be stick to that ways in the future. That some and for my experience, actually we are using we have the local bare metal and virtual machine in our cloud. So when we using the bare metal and virtual machine, we have some issue for the access controlling problems for auto scaling or scale out. Yeah, so I put the topics here at line 45, 54, but sounds like is there any no access control issue for that your software stack? Is there any access control issue for that in your software stack?
We are all reading what John is typing now.
Thank you.
I should say it really, shouldn't I?
Type faster,
So,
John.
I was trying, but then it gets even more illegible. So I'd say one of the things I've been seeing is that application credentials have made a big difference in terms of access control. This is very OpenStack specific, right? But in terms of providing credentials to the Keystone API, in recent releases, you can now create OpenStack. You can create application credentials and use those instead of your username and password. The great thing being you can delete them and revoke them at any time. You can also give them a subset of your roles, and you can start, I think I haven't actually tried it out in the latest releases, but I think you can actually start to restrict which URLs that application credential has access to. But the reason I was interested in this is actually because certainly in the HPC and scientific computing case, there's an awful lot of push for people to bring their own credentials to applications. So it's specifically what that means is that when you're logging into OpenStack, or indeed the application is running on OpenStack, you use your usual work account to log in, SSO or whatever, but you don't want that very valuable credential being used for autoscale, as you rightly said, Masahito. I don't want to put my I don't want to put the thing that can get hold of to book holiday for me in an automated script to do that. And application credentials kind of gives you that middle ground. I don't know if other people have played with that.
Oh yeah. So when you scale out the bare metal servers with bare metal or virtual machine with Magnum, I think is there, do you have any the DBACL or something like that for that applications? Because even for the OpenStack deployment, when the old scale out with Kubernetes, it might hit the ACL issues for the DB or something, DBACL or some things. I think that if I missed the technology which allow to outscale the DBACL stuff with the Kubernetes outscaling or something, that I think we should start to use that. But
yeah, I can certainly say I've seen some good success using the Magnum Kubernetes autoscaler in terms of, so your workload inside that is doing horizontal pod autoscaling, which puts pressure on the Kubernetes cluster to decide it needs new cluster nodes, and then Magnum could provide those extra nodes. Although underneath that, in terms of access control, I guess that's all using trusts right now, as I understand it.
like okay, thank you. Is there any comment or your idea for this one? If nothing, then we can move on to the next topics.
Before moving, Prakash here, is the Magnum auto-scaling equivalent of role-based access control of Kubernetes? Does it support that? So you have n number of users and therefore it auto-scales itself for allowing additional spawning of new cluster or containers? I'm confused here based on what the access control is mentioned here. Maybe you can help me, or we can talk offline later.
Okay, so from my point, I put this access control from the application run on the Kubernetes or the any virtual machine or bare metal, which can be managed from the API, OpenStack API, to any other applications, to the other application, maybe like a database for some applications for applications or database for somewhere else. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So I guess if we're talking about access, yeah. So for Kubernetes, talking back to OpenStack in terms of access control there, certainly the credentials that you give a scope to the project in the usual Keystone RBAC sense, if that makes sense. So an example, so generally you're giving Kubernetes in a particular namespace, or generally across namespaces, you enable some functionality that requires OpenStack credentials. So for example, if you've got the OpenStack provider creating load balancers on your behalf, generally you just give that, you give access to that functionality through a particular user. That certainly works. Maybe we want to move on.
And yeah. Can I interrupt that conversations? We got the result of the voting. Can we copy and paste that result to the Etherpad or not? Okay, anyway, it looks like in the software stack we have the issue on the networking first, and second is deployment. Yeah, so if someone want to something, someone want to talk about the networking issue difficulties or deployment difficulty, that's okay for talk. If not, I think we only have maybe 10 minutes left, so we can.
On the deployment, that's interesting. You know that deployment was the second highest option there in the poll. Is that deployment? There's some information around like development and testing and application delivery, which are all kind of deployment related. So I'd be interested to see what people are using there or challenges they're having with those topics as well.
Yeah. So okay. So let's move on to the development and testing. Development quickly then. So looks like no one.
Question here is, does it make allocation, reservation of resource for the scaling in the access when you mention, or is it trigger for scaling? Simple. It's just an alarm or a trigger.
Sorry, but for what?
No, when you say auto scale and access while accessing, if you find something you need to scale, does it mean it's a trigger for allocation or is it a alarm for scaling? What does that indicate?
I think this is the comment that John had put in on line 58.
Yeah, maybe I was wondering if that was a question to me. I can go through what that actually does. So an interesting example, because you were bringing up users logging in. One particular application that I've seen a lot make good use of this is Jupyter Hub. The general idea is that as a user logs in, if they're authorized, it spins up an extra container and sets of environments for that particular user. If you're using things like Pangeo, you've got a whole load of Dask workers it spins up. So anyway, there's an action that triggers more containers to be required within the cluster. Another example is that you might be using the horizontal pod autoscaler, and that uses a whole heap of reasons why it might decide to scale. Now, I think out the box, what the Magnum autoscaler is what cluster autoscaler within Kubernetes is actually doing is really looking for the case where you could no longer start any more containers. So, the containers that you request go into the pending state. It detects that and then triggers the auto scaling. So generally that's if there's not enough CPU, enough memory to start that container, given the request for that particular container. So it depends on the application, but fundamentally, where I've seen the Magnum cluster autoscaler do the best things is where, for whatever reason, the application spawns more containers and then room is made for those. And the system does have like back off pressure to stop it flapping between tearing down VMs and recreating them again. Does that help answer your question?
Yes. If that.
Yes, I meant.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Okay.
So if possible, if possible, we want to jump onto the next stuffs a little bit, development and testings. So like for development and testing sections. So I think all of us who are running our cloud or our application, we have some gating the mechanism for our deployment, our cloud. So in the Etherpads, no one writes anything in the just so but I hope if someone use any gating mechanism for your application, please write your ideas. And as for the testing framework is as well. Please put your idea on the Etherpad or how can I say that, share your thought for that stuff. So in our case, in LINE case, depending on the project, but for us, we use the Jenkins for the gatings basically, but for the others, the continuous integration, we use the drone CI and drone CI for building the applications and testing for our OpenStack code internally with custom code. Yeah. And actually we thought that we introduced Zoo-like gating system, but first it takes times for introducing the architecture, so that we are not using the Zoo right now, but yeah. And Prakash, are you speaking something?
Yeah. Okay, I can speak.
No.
In the airship we do use a combination of Zool and some of them, because they go to Metal Cube, we do see some testing using Prowl or something, PROW Pro. So yes, there are variations, whether it's Jenkins or Zool or sure. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. The in Doom chat, your names is colored yellow, so I thought you were talking something. Yeah, thank you. And looks like no reactions for the deployment. No deployment for the gating stuff. So does everyone use Zoo right now?
Yeah, for OpenDev, yes, Zool is the option we have. We don't go for Jenkins, but yes, some of the other OPNFE folks do use Jenkins still, and also Nordics, that is EU folks also use Jenkins.
And for testing stuff, looks like we have the someone use Rally, Tempest, and I don't know the third one, Cloud Buster. But
Does anybody know Cloudbuster? I'm not familiar
Yes,
with that either.
Cloudbuster is using is a tool for load testing OpenStack for data plane actually. It's a great tool that you can load test your network plane and the storage plane with different scenarios.
So it feels like those testing frameworks are more for testing the infrastructure side of things, not necessarily the applications that are running on top of it, right? Because Wally, Tempest, and Cloudbuster all test the OpenStack APIs and not the application on top of the OpenStack APIs.
Oh, that's nice tool for testing. Yeah, so the three of the testing framework are the major for the major tools for our software stack. So if nothing else for the other testing frameworks for the software stack, we can move on to the next one, security hardening to complement DevSecOps. So the who wrote that? The Swiss did this right. So okay. I don't know who wrote this, but okay. So. And for the other stuff, let's move on to the application delivery. So but it's already running out of time. So I think it's not a forum session, but if should we have the next work item or something for that session, open dev session?
If there's something that comes up and makes sense, then yes. I'm trying to think if there's anything that has popped out in this session.
I feel like we can work on at the large scale SIG as we collect the scaling stories, people ramping up their deployments. When do they consider new tools, or do they evolve the software they are using to run their infrastructure, but also for the applications that run on the workloads that run on top of that infrastructure, and how that evolves over time based on scaling. So far we've mostly looked into the bottlenecks and scaling issues, but we could also look from an architectural perspective. and see how those deployments evolve over time too as they scale. What do you think, Masahito? It's an interesting thing to try.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That as you said, we as large scale things, we are collecting the user story for the problems while we are getting bigger, the cloud size getting bigger. So I think from the discussion we have the point to put the user stories so we can so we can put the time story for the scaling. So scaling story, I forgot the actual name, but scaling story of the large scale thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's been a great session. I think
thank you.
I think we're gonna kick it over to Ashley to give us a quick wrap up for the day. But thank you so much for leading that session. It was great, and we have a lot of good follow-ups with the large scale SIG if you want to get involved there and keep pushing this forward. Ashley, do you want to wrap us up for the day?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So thank you again to Masahito. That was wonderful. And thank you to our other moderators, John and Beth. And thank you to everybody who joined today. I think we had people from all over the world, which is very cool. So thank you for staying up super late or waking up really early to join us. We really appreciate it. We think that this was a great day of Open Dev, and we're looking forward to tomorrow. So again, just we took some cool polls today, which we'll do more of tomorrow. We learned that upgrades are a big pain for a lot of people, and the software stack can be difficult on a variety of levels, everywhere from networking to auto scaling to testing. And so we want you to keep sharing this information with us. Again, you can take the user survey. Allison Price really supports that. She said, please take it, or you will hurt. So please do that. So again, share that, share more in the Etherpad if there's anything that we didn't get to today. Those Etherpads live on forever, so we'll be able to refer back to them. And again, drop your contact information in there, please, if you're interested in connecting with others. And we want to keep this conversation going. So again, we want to direct you to the large scale SIG. That's going to be the best place to continue these conversations. So we encourage you to join that and get involved. We're going to be dropping some of those links in the chat so you can learn a little bit more about those things. And then let us know some feedback on this event. If you have any suggestions for how this event could be smoother or anything that might add additional value, please let us know. We'll also drop in an Etherpad that links to that. And yeah, I will turn it over to Mark to give us a little heads up on what's going to happen tomorrow.
All right, yes, tomorrow we have some really exciting sessions. Bare metal, this is one of the hottest topics right now. If you look at the different tools for automating the data center, no matter what you're running, higher up the stack, the bare metal automation, there's so much innovation going on there for enabling different types of hardware, looking at the life cycle of all the stuff that you're putting in and out of your data center. It's a really rich space for innovation and sharing best practices. And we have some folks doing it at an amazing scale and also experts on those different tools. And we also have, of course, an edge computing session, another very hot topic these days. Touched on it a little bit today in Beth's session and yesterday as well. So both of those are expected to be really awesome opportunities to engage. So their Etherpads are out there. If you look at the schedule link here, we'll drop it in the chat as well. The schedule link links to the Etherpad so you can look. And I think it really helps if you look at those before we get to the session, start to populate it or at least familiarize yourself. So if you're wanting to jump in and participate, to unmute and join the conversation, the more you can look at those before we reach that point, the better prepared we'll all be. And then we have a session scheduled for a wrap up of the week, talk about what we've learned and how we're going to work together going forward with these different SIGs and work groups and all the different efforts that are going on throughout the industry. So that's what we have on tap for tomorrow. And that will be our final day of this Open Dev. And then we have 2 more Open Devs, don't forget, coming soon. So if you go to openstack.org/opendev, you can register for the next 2 events that are also talking about open source infrastructure. And so with that, I'll just say, come back tomorrow and we'll see you then. And that's a wrap. And I hope you all had a good time with OpenDev today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.